Hey Patreons, welcome to this week's Q&A. I have just moved into my new place, so everything's completely in disarray. I just slapped together this recording setup and hopefully it's okay and in sync and looks decent enough. I got no backdrop or anything. I don't even know where it is, to be honest with you. Over there, right next to me, I have a gigantic pile of stuff I got to start going through, but I still really wanted to do this Q&A today. And I also wanted to say that I'm definitely going to go through with the mini giveaways. And the first one was actually donated by another Patreon, the Importer. So this one is going to be a giveaway for a 3DS download code for Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which I think is awesome. I talked about that on last week's podcast, and I think it's a very cool game. And if you don't have it and you have a 3DS, there's going to be a separate topic. Just post in there, I'm in, or yes, or whatever. Don't post in this Q&A topic though, because I'm still using Dirk Swizzler's Patreon scan tool that he wrote me, and it works so perfect that I don't want to screw that up. So immediately after this one's posted, you'll see another giveaway one. Just post down below there if you're interested, and I'll do the drawing for that next week. So thanks so much to the Importer for donating that. I thought that was very cool. And there'll be a lot more little things to come. Nothing too crazy or exciting, but hey, it's free shit, so why not? But let's jump into the questions. First up, Pete from M-Monkey asked, how much will I be spending on shipping stuff if I do additional giveaways? There was one giveaway I did that weighed like 2 ounces, and the person happened to live like 40 minutes away. And there was another giveaway I did that was 20 pounds, and the person lived, very far away. So you're right, the shipping could get a little crazy. I'll just have to rethink that. And things like digital giveaways or smaller ones, or I don't really know. If there's anything huge, I would probably save it for the big monthly giveaway. And if it's something really, really big, like if I ever get extra RGB monitors or something, I'll just make sure to put the caveat that you have to pay shipping. But at the moment, everything that I have in mind for the foreseeable future is small enough where it's not going to break the bank. But that's a good and funny point. Ben Abrish had kind of a cool question. He asked, what would I do if I won the lottery and had a buttload of money to pour into retro RGB? Would I stay solo or get the roundtable people? Would I start a super company? Well, first of all, anything I do, I always try to bring along the people I love with me. So I've been dragging Scott into crazy adventures since we were 10 years old. Some were awesome, some did not end so well. And if I had the money, I would absolutely do that for the roundtable people. Just basically find some cool stuff and drag them along with me. And so absolutely, I would never consider myself going it solo. I always want to be surrounded by the awesome people that I'm lucky enough to be friends with. I think from an unrealistic standpoint, I win $100 million. There's one company that I like, but I feel like if they had a lot more funding and a little more help, they could completely change the way retro gaming is played. So I would love to just go buy that company. Because if you have, $100 million to spend, you could make some mistakes and it won't matter. Whereas, if you're relying on the income of your company, as with any business, maybe you don't want to roll the dice on some things that could fail and then shut the company down. On a slightly more realistic level, though, there's one thing I've been gunning for a long time, and that's being able to have an interactive museum of sorts where you could actually go in and have the original experience of some of the rarer stuff. So while I absolutely love arcades and while I love all the consoles, there are certain things that you can't quite replicate the experience of. And one of them that all of us retro gamers should probably know is getting a nice big CRT, like one of those 32-inch Sonys, and playing a light gun game on it. Because while it's not the best shooting experience in the world, it's something that you can't really recreate with, the Wii motion controller and a little target on the screen. Other things like any of the 3D games, and especially the rare arcade stuff. Afterburner Arcade I talk about all the time because it just blew my mind as a kid that I was able to climb into the cockpit of an F-14 and fly around shooting stuff. And you could absolutely hate that game, but you still have to admit that that's not an experience you're ever going to recreate with emulation unless you actually built a machine that moves when you're shooting and stuff. So that's something not only have I been working on behind the scenes, I've been talking to people. I've actually talked to a few different places that want to do something like that on a much smaller scale. Maybe do one very small installation at a time just to demonstrate the differences. So I've been talking to a few museums. I'm always talking to Chris from iFix Arcade. We're going to be doing a lot of, just small test out some stuff over there to see if people are into it. But that's the more realistic goal that I've been working on, and hopefully I could stay in the game long enough to make it happen. So, but yeah, that was a very awesome question, and I tried to keep it as short as possible because that's something I could talk about for a very long time. But the short answer to your question, would I stay solo? Hell no. I'm bringing everybody with me. Would you start a super company? If I could, sure. And if the money was infinite, I'd hire all the smartest guys I know to help all of the people who are just starting out on their get their designs out into the public, which would be a complete time and money sink. But, if I had a couple $100 million, I could make that happen. Beefy commented about those CRT comparison shots from last time. That's one of my favorite things that I've done. And I'll be honest, that didn't start out as an official comparison. That started out as most of the things on this website it just started out as me being curious and going, well, I wonder if I could actually count the amount of lines and see the difference. And then once I had it zoomed in, I loved it. So yeah, absolutely. By the end of the summer, I would love to go back and do, actually, I think there's a lot of videos like that I could do. Maybe I could do a quick 10-minute that just shows the difference, and based on how many hits that gets, if it's something that's a big deal, maybe I can go and really do an in-depth comparison of different types of CRTs. But I'm glad you like that, and I would love to do more of those in the future on a more official capacity, not just like a throw it in there in the Q&A thing. Mike W. said that he's interested in getting a new TCL 4K TV, and he wants to know if there's anything else that he needs to connect his OSS C 1.6 to it. I haven't personally tested the 2018s yet. I believe they work fine just as is. But as soon as this move is over, I gotta head over to my cousin Nick's house and test his. Depending on what happens, I might actually end up getting one for myself, one of the smaller ones. But that's definitely something I'll be reporting on soon because I'm very curious myself. And I'm also curious about, are there any weird quirks like the 2017 TVs where you have to go into the Roku app and turn off the advanced menu setting in order to get the low lag. So, but as far as I know, you just plug the OSS C in and that's it. You don't need anything else. And I'll certainly report back as soon as I know if there's any advanced features required and what the actual lag of those panels are. Adam Fowler had a couple of good questions about SMS modding, so I'll just run through them one at a time. First, he wants to know if there's RGB quality differences between any of the regions, US, Japanese, Brazil, whatever. And as far as I know, there are not any differences because a lot of the interference you get actually, I think, comes from those Sega chips themselves. Next, he wants to know if there's any place to buy the RGB boards. Renee's triple bypass, whenever it's released, will work with an SMS as well. However, at the moment, you could still get Alex Arcade TV's board. It's completely free. He open sources all of his designs. You just have to have the boards made and then populate them yourself. And just make sure you use the diagram for the SMS because it's going to be different components on the board. But here's the hard part of the question. Do you really want to go through with this on an SMS? And here's why. It is my opinion based on my testing. I never like to talk in definites because all nerds know that maybe more testing you'll find something different. But out of the extensive testing that I've done on Master System consoles, I think that one part of the interference is actually coming from one of the Sega chips. And I think that the interference is happening on the chip itself. If that's true, you'll actually never be able to get a perfectly clean SMS image unless you're using FPGA, kind of like Kevtris's core on the Analog NT Mini. So just keep that in mind that as far as I know up till now, no one's gotten a perfect SMS. But that being said, there's a couple scenarios where you might still want to do it. If you're using a BVM, like even one of the 1,000-line really high-end ones, or any CRT at all actually, doing the bypass, you're going to notice a bit of a sharpness difference. A lot of the jail bars are going to be gone, and in my opinion, it is definitely worth it. It's overall going to be a great signal, and you're probably not going to see the last of the jail bars on a CRT. But if you're going through an OSS C into a flat screen, you're still going to notice a little bit of interference on there. And it might not bother you, it might bother you. Maybe it's worth it to RGB bypass a Genesis, or just at least remove the subcarrier signal so that You could remove most of the jail bars anyway. But I would just really ask yourself, how important is it to you to do the bypass on an SMS? It was very important for me to work on my MK2000. I wanted to get that as perfect as possible because I loved the whole built-in FM, built-in 3D. I just thought it was really neat. So it is worth it to me, and I'm going to go back and still work on that with Voltar at some point again. But, you know, maybe consider using a Genesis and a power base FM from DB Electronics instead. It's really up to you. Matthew Hunola wants to know if I'll be testing out the Otaku 6-port RGB SCART switch. Yes. I tested this thing out quickly. I only have about an hour or two into it. Most of my testing before I do a review is hours and hours. But from what I found using shielded cables and having more than one console powered on at a time, I didn't see any interference with this. I did not put it on a scope. I did not spend a lot of time. I didn't mix and match. I didn't try sync-on composite cables. But I did try a bunch of C-Sync cables, shielded and unshielded. I plugged in 4 and powered them on at the same time and switched between them, and I did not find any interference or any major issues. I did find it really helpful to have the RCA outputs. I just thought that made it easier to plug it into RGB monitors because I could just use BNC to RCA or vice versa. So overall, for the money, I would, at the moment, get this over a Bandridge or any of those others. Please, once again, keep in mind, though, I only have an hour or two into testing this. Maybe I'll find some crazy thing that I don't like about it. But if you're looking for a cheaper SCART switch to start, I think this is probably going to be a handy tool to have. The only thing you have to keep in mind is while there are 2 outputs, it's not dual outputs. You cannot use them at the same time, one or the other only. Otherwise, you'll double draw off the signal, and it'll ruin the image, and it's not good for your consoles or the display. So I hope that mini 1-minute review answered your question. But at the very least, it's not junk, without a doubt. I've tested some things where I plugged it right in and just went, ugh, no thank you. So yeah, I think it's a great way to start out. I still use my G-SCART switches for, you know, all of my actual gaming, but this thing has come in handy a lot. Connery Cattani wanted to know what's the best and worst consoleized Neo Geo MVS you can buy. I'm really not sure what you would call the best. I think there's a few out there that are very good with, you know, nothing wrong with them. The worst, all the rest. There are so many out there that output improper voltage, that have some kind of issues with them. There's a lot of slapped together ones. And there's, as far as I know, there was a few higher end ones that actually performed pretty badly. But I don't know enough about it to comment, and I don't think it's fair that I just run my mouth without data. Or at least screenshots or anything else. But that's a rough one because consoleized MVSs would solve a lot of people's problems. Imagine if you had one that was really well done, you know, everything was attenuated properly, and you could switch between JAMA or RGB output. That means you could have that hooked up to your home console, you know, play it on your couch, and if you want to also plug it into an arcade machine, you just pick it up and plug it into the JAMA adapter in your arcade machine. So I see a lot of great uses for consoleized MVSs. I just don't know enough about them to answer that properly. So, sorry. Vanessa Palmer said she just got a PC Engine Duo RX from Japan, and she found out that Japan runs at a different voltage, 100 volts, while the US does 110 to 120. So she wants to know if you should get a step-down converter. I actually just had this conversation with my buddy John, who also got a Core Graphics, and he did buy a step-down converter to be safe. And I mentioned this to Steve because I had a suspicion that that's not necessary. So in many cases, it wouldn't hurt the console using the original AC adapter, but it's not every case, and it's not a risk I think anyone should take because there's an easier solution. This Power Plus adapter that Steve from HD Retrovision found and tested, this is the very cheap one on Amazon, and then this pigtail adapter thingy should be all you need. So you buy one of these, you buy the adapter for it, which the adapter's cheap, shipping costs more, so maybe buy 2 or 3 just because, and that's it. You could actually use these. I would double check on the website what it is for the Duo RX. This adapter, this particular one, is the one for the Core Graphics. So that's what I would recommend doing instead of dealing with step-down converters, because they're big and heavy and get in the way. And at the end of the day, something like this would produce the voltage that you would need anyway. So great question, and I would definitely take the very cheap and very easy route that's been tested and shown to be a good power supply. Anapan had a few questions about Genesis RGB bypasses. So first, would cap replacement fix things? It would never hurt. So if you're going to be doing all of this work on your Genesis, maybe just include that as well. They were planning to follow the guide that used Alex from Arcade TV's board, which is the same one I used. I loved it, no complaints at all about it. The only thing that you just want to think about is if you're going through your OSS C, you might be able to use the 7316 chip because it doesn't have a low pass filter, and the one on the OSS C is actually better. If you just don't want to deal with it, or you know you might be going directly into a capture card, just use the 7314 and turn off the filter on the OSS C so you don't lose that little extra bit of sharpness. And the last question is, can I recommend a modder who has experience with this kind of work in North America? The only issue with that is there are so many good modders now. There's been a lot of, there's always has been. It's just easier to track down who's who. So in my opinion, it's just whoever's geographically closest to you, I would use. Obviously in Brooklyn, I always talk about Jose from iFix Retro. Guy does amazing work. If you're closer to Canada, maybe you'd rather go through Leon K, who's in Toronto. And there's just a ton of people all over the place. So I guess I would just pick the closest person to you and see who'd be willing to do it. But I do agree with you, your statement of, I have previously been unsuccessful at surface mount replacement, so I prefer an expert to do the surgery. I do kind of have a strong opinion about this, because I force myself to do a lot of these mods knowing I'm not great at them. And if I wasn't trying to write guides and help other people out, I would almost always rather have somebody else do it, because the truth is, and I'm sorry for repeating myself, I feel like I say this every couple of weeks, but in order for you to do these things the right way, you need to invest a lot of money. And yeah, you can get knockoffs. I have the Heiko, the knockoff soldering kit and the knockoff desoldering gun, but that and all the accessories is still like $200. So if you're only doing 2 or 3 of these mods, it's definitely better to just go to an expert. So I agree with your opinion on that. And so I guess I would just pick whichever person's closest to you. And maybe if you're not sure who is, post down in the comments and people could chime in and help out. Jesse Onland had a great question, and one that I could actually use some help with if anybody has any opinions. The question was, can I put audio from these Q&As into the podcast feed? So at the moment, it's a 1-month delay before they go public. So if everybody wanted to, so like this one's airing today, the day that I'm shooting it. 1 month from today is when everybody else will get it. I could put audio of that out on the feed, absolutely. But I don't know of a way to do that in real time through Patreon. I don't think Patreon has great tools for these things. I could put an MP3 only version up for download as a Patreon link if that's something you guys wanted. And in fact, maybe I'll do that maybe I'll just do that today to see if anybody wants it. But as far as actually using a podcast app, I don't know how to do that and restrict it to Patreons. So if anybody knows anything about these things, please let me know. If you have a contact at Patreon that doesn't take 3 days to respond and doesn't give generic cookie cutter answers like, thanks for the great suggestion, but we're working on it. I'm always down to do whatever I can. I just don't know how I would pull that off. So if anybody has any suggestions, I'm all ears. At the very least, I'll try to put an MP3, a link to the MP3 in this description today. Armed and Overclocked recently picked up a good quality consumer grade CRT and wants to know how to go about finding a good modder for it. At the moment, I'm really not sure if there's a good place for that. You could definitely try the Shmups forum and the CRT modding thread and see if there's anybody in your area. I believe there's a Facebook CRT group, probably a few of them, but I don't go on Facebook. Maybe it's awesome, maybe it sucks. I have no idea. I'm sorry. That's probably the best bet at the moment. Maybe somebody in the comments here, if they're in your area, you said Virginia, so it stinks. I'm trying to get a new site together. It's step by step. It's getting there. Somebody's helping me out now and doing a ridiculously good job. So at the very least, the revamp of my site will release soon, and then hopefully soon to come will be the wiki and maybe a forum or something. But for the short term, meaning at least the next 6 months, I think you should just hunt around on forums and make sure to get other people's opinions. It's rough because in order to do it right, you either have to have somebody that's done a ton of them or somebody who truly understands the concept, can grab a scope and test the lines, knows how to do it under load, knows how to do it without dying. So yeah, it's hard, and I wish I had a better answer. Spencer NB had a couple of questions. First, do I ever see myself doing a more current comparison video of the Framemeister versus the OSS C? Not at the moment, just because I have so many other things I really want to get out there. But the short version is, if you want guaranteed compatibility with every device, you really need compatibility. Just get the Framemeister and the Firebrand X profiles and never worry about a thing. If you're striving for zero lag, the best color quality, supporting a community member, Marcus and Video Game Perfection, who sells it, the OSS C is definitely better in my opinion. You just need to make sure that the equipment that you're going to be using it with is compatible with it. So it's a hard decision if you don't already know. So maybe try posting on Shmups or on Video Game Perfections forums to see if other people have your equipment that could verify compatibility. And your other question was about capture cards. So the only capture card I know of that I don't have any issues with everything I throw at it is that DataPath Vision E1 or E1S, but that is internal only. The ones you were talking about were USB 3, and I have not to this day found a perfect USB 3 solution. The Epiphan card I have works absolutely great. It's actually what I'm using today to record this video. It just isn't compatible with most OSS C modes, and it kind of drives me crazy, to be honest with you. The one that you mentioned, the StarTech USB 3 HD cap, I had that one for a while, and for streaming and overall use, I thought it was great. I think it works with most OSS C modes. I vaguely remember somebody saying 1 through 4 works, but not 5. But maybe that changed, and maybe that's wrong, so please double check on that one. The only thing about that card is if you're using it for comparison shots. So let's say you designed yourself an RGB bypass board, you tested it on a scope, it looks good, but you want examples, go with a higher end card, don't use that one. Just to repeat myself though, it's completely fine for streaming. It's just when you start zooming in deep into it, you see compression artifacts and things that aren't really part of the console. It's a product of the capture card. And you mentioned the Elgato Cam Link. A lot of people use the other Elgato, the S. I forgot the full name. And it seems to be okay, but I'm not sure about full OSS C compatibility. But just specifically the Cam Link, I bought that one to try it out, and it worked fine on my laptop. It was nothing special, but it didn't work at all on my desktop, so I sent that back. Somebody else talked to me, and their response was that thing's junk. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you're going to go Elgato, I would go with the other one, the S, which isn't that much more expensive anyway. But either way, it's the same issue as monitors or flat screen TVs. I would just go on any one of the official OSS C threads and ask, just to make sure other people who have that equipment are able to use it with the OSS C. Colin Retro asked, how do you test if an AC adapter is bad, and what would you suggest to find a replacement? So the first part's pretty tricky, because sometimes it's really hard to tell. The best way, I think, is to just plug it in, turn your console on, and then touch a multimeter, a decent multimeter, to the power on the board and see what voltage you're getting. If it's way too low or something, then that's one way to know that it's bad. A way that people have been finding out, a hard way that people have been finding out, is I've talked to a bunch of people that did the SNES RGB bypass, and they were just banging their heads against the wall trying to figure out why it didn't look good, until they finally realized, oh, let me try a different power supply, and then it looked perfect. So that certainly could be a sign of it going bad. I'm sure there's a lot more expert tricks that I don't want to speak to, because a lot of times in these Q&As I talk off the cuff and I don't want to give wrong information. But testing it with a multimeter and seeing if there's any issues with it altogether are a good way to do it. But the second part of your question is a much easier answer. How do you find a replacement AC adapter? The link that you put up, the same one that HD Retrovision talks about, is a great adapter. It's the same one I just recommended to Vanessa a few questions ago. I mean, it's $14 on Amazon Prime. As long as you use the right pigtail adapters, you can't go wrong. I personally have never put this one on a scope. Steve has. But what I can say is that, and I've been doing I've been using it for all of my comparison tests, and I've never seen an issue, and very often I'll second guess myself and just say, well, all right, let me grab a known good OEM power supply and see if it's any different, and it's always the same. So if you're worried about, is my power supply good, I've had some issues with it, I would just buy that. As long as your console's on the chart that HD Retrovision listed on your site, you have no problems. I would just confidently use it. I'm always nervous saying stuff like that, as a nerd, just to have such an absolute answer of yes. You never know, but I guess a better way of saying that is, in all of the testing myself and my friends have done, we've never run into a negative thing about this power supply. So there you go. I didn't just figure it out. That's a better explanation of the answer. Sorry. Bad Reality asked if I had any plans to do Garo comparisons. And it's not something I have time to anytime soon. And I certainly don't mean any disrespect to the Behar Brothers Garo, no disrespect to Gozpaz's mod that he did to it. It's something I would love to get to at some point, but I have so many other things that I need to get done right away. You also asked, how does it compare to the Extron CVC300? I've actually never used that Extron. I'm really sorry about that. So unfortunately, I completely fell short in answering you this time, but all I could say is that people have not had good luck with the Garo. I have, so maybe, I really wouldn't even know what to recommend at this point, so very sorry. Brian Harmon asked what soldering iron I would recommend, both for beginners and then maybe more advanced users. So I'll show a few options. A few of my friends recommended this one. It's just a $25 one that you could find on eBay, and I believe it uses Heiko tips. So maybe this would be a good one to start out with, just because you can get some good tips and then upgrade your soldering gun later. I have no experience with it though, so I'm just kind of going by what other people have told me about it. But for $25, it seems like something that, even if it only worked for a few months or a year, pretty decent investment. And at the very least, it's better than those soldering guns that you used to get from Radio Shack with like the dial on the side. But that one, it was recommended to me from other people as a pretty good way to start out. The one that I bought when starting out, the 937D, I still have and I still use. It's okay. It comes with multiple tips, and it heated up fast enough. I never really had any problems with it. It started to make a lot of noise now. People say I could silicone some of the loose parts and then it would be fine, but it's time for me to upgrade. But that did last a few years, so that's one I have experience with that was fine. The other cheaper one's supposed to be a little bit better. But the higher end options, a lot of the modders refer to this next one as their favorite, the best one for their use. I mean, you could spend a lot of money, but $250 something for the Heiko FX 951. This kit on Amazon comes with a bunch of different accessories with it too. I think it comes with multiple wands as well. You can get just the FX 951 by itself for a little bit cheaper, but this is the one that I think a lot of the people who are experts, I guess you'd say, would probably prefer. There is a cheaper Heiko solution out there. This is one, I think you can get it for $99, but this is one that comes with a lot of stuff for just a little bit more. And that one's $140 on Amazon. And I also had mixed opinions on this one from the experts, in that, it's a 25-year-old design. It's not as good as the other one, but it's almost half the price. So, maybe this would be the intermediate one. Maybe this is the one I should get so I could test and give my own opinion on it. But I think that's a pretty good range of guns. I mean, to start out with this $25 one, even if it just works okay, as long as it works, it's $25. I mean, that's pretty cool. And then, all the way up to the expert one at $250. And the wands themselves can get really expensive depending on the tips that you need. So I think that pretty much covers the basics. I'm not sure if there's anything else in the middle that I could recommend, but at the very least, you have the low end and the high end to start out with. So hope that was a decent answer. Well, that's it for this week. Please remember to post your questions for next week down below on the Patreon page. You guys know I love hearing from you, so post whatever you got. And also, please remember to post on the other Patreon post if you're interested in the Curse of the Moon 3DS download code. Once again, another massive thank you to the importer for donating that. That was very cool. So just please remember to keep them separate, because I just think it would be too hard to sift through the people who want in on the drawing versus the Q&A questions. And let me know what you think, if that's too confusing to deal with two posts. Always interested in your comments. Also, was the noise of the street too loud? I'm on a main road here, so I don't know if the lapel mic's picking up anything. A few times, a ton of fire and police trucks went by, so I had to redo the segment. But hopefully the medium noise wouldn't come through. And either way, I'm going to keep tweaking this setup now that I'm in the new place. Probably take me a few weeks to get it all perfect, but I'll get there. But as always, thank you guys so much for all your support. I couldn't do any of this without you, and I just really appreciate it. So I just finished moving, and I really wanted to just crack a beer and chill, but I was like, hell no, I got to do the Patreon Q&A. I love all those guys, and I want to make sure to keep my promise of the Friday Q&As. So thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next time.